So during this lunchtime, we are going to have a speaker who's an alumnus and an esteemed one at that. And so we are really fortunate to have him here to give his comments on IP in a decentralized world, picking up where we just left off. If you thought that was great, wait till you feel this one. So I won't speak much. His full bio is set out in materials. Thomas Doty. Tom, okay. He's a DARPA-trained engineer, so that's in the coding sector. So he's been in this 1 or 2 minutes or so and seen the evolution over time of the very things that we were talking about earlier. He's also a military veteran. He currently holds roles as general counsel for Tax Token, managing technology protection, legal spend, and guiding on cryptocurrency and international data compliance and regulatory issues of blockchain and artificial intelligence technology transactions. That's a mouthful, but without further ado, I welcome you to the podium and thank you for returning home.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Okay, before we get in there, I'm going to take my forum and just tell you, I have some new heroes. When I found out about Professor Evans and the work she's been doing, I reached out to her and said, you are on the right track because of what I'm seeing on the other side of this. And then when I got familiar with this group the last day or so, it is remarkable what the academics in this room are doing, because I'm going to just tell you that we as attorneys, we have as academics, we as the people that are putting knowledge out in the industry, we have a really bad problem. We have a supply chain problem. We do not have the resources to be able to even look at this deeply or even come to the standing of being able to supply the needed resources and the new way that you have to look at these problems. So, with that being said, this is going to be a keynote by consensus, because you see, as long as we have enough people, we can write that next block and we can then move on. But what Professor Evans just said, I am a geek. I never, ever, ever wanted to be an attorney, and I never even gave it any thought. I go back when I worked in an agency that didn't have a name, with a place that didn't have a budget, and we weren't even allowed to talk about it. And as such, I was a geek with that group. And the only way, Mike Muse isn't here, but the only way you even learned about computers in the 70s is you had to be some sort of an engineer to get access to those computers. And if you wanted to work for the most highly secretive group and work with computers that hadn't been developed yet, you had to even kind of go one step from there. But we became a little disillusioned with where the law and the system was going within that agency, and I decided after 10 years to get out. I had just interviewed a few years earlier with a gentleman in Albuquerque, New Mexico, who tried to convince me that as a cryptologic expert, that he was really looking for people to help build out his core foundation of his business. And I was thinking, well, do I want to go? Do I want to stay? What should I do? And Albuquerque, New Mexico didn't really interest me. But I should have paid a little more attention that they were moving to Redmond, because I would have been employee number 21. Oh, wow. And so with that being said, and I say that with great reverence because he passed last week. So, but we are the visionaries that are going to take this technology well into the 21st century. We're already there, but the reality is that we as in the knowledge leaders have to really give this a tremendous amount of thought. So, luckily, I've got to tell you, I had to search this quote out, and I didn't know who said it, but my father always said, if you don't understand history, you're going to repeat it. And so I started really looking at it because I didn't want to say my father always told me, and I found out who this quote actually comes from. And it comes from a remarkable creative as well as a brilliant individual whose IP was exploited for several years. But what she really said is, you can't know where you are going until you know where you have been. And I say that both from a technological standpoint as well as a societal standpoint and as from a legal standpoint. So that's where we're going to focus, because how do I beat this panel of esteemed experts? And seriously, Professor Evans' summary was remarkable, although I am going to kind of throw my 2 cents in there as well. But you think about all the IP that this woman generated over her career of 50 years. She spanned everything, I think, with the exception of graphic IP, which like art, fine art, digital art, it never existed, but Grammys and movies and screenplays and the written word. It went across the board, a lot of the IP that then needed to be properly compensated for. So we're going to talk about, what decentralization really is. And I heard such emotion and such passion. And I'm going to just tell you something. In 1976, I was working with this technology. This technology is not new. Okay, Bitcoin is new. Satoshi's mandate is somewhat new, but I'm going to dispute that as well. And the reality is that everything old is new again, and that's usually what happens. So we're not really starting from ground zero again to start truly evaluating the legal ramifications of this. Let's fall back to what we know as attorneys, which is precedent. So with that being said, I knew this guy. He worked down at Intel. His name was Tim May. If you've never really heard about Tim May, we would access each other's work because he would send it through, when I first met him, through ARPA. And then when there was true BBSs, I was a cyberpunker, and I would pull that back up. But he was the guy who actually drove Satoshi's bottom line mandate, and if you will, his concepts. So, and I don't believe he is Satoshi. So, and really, if you kind of looked at it, I went back to my emails that we actually sent back and forth to each other to see, if I actually had the anarchist manifest. And that's really where a lot of this is all coming from. And I actually did. So I was looking at that because I archive all my emails forever and go back to that. But the Bitcoin currency and wallets, that's not even new. Because as I was telling you about Paul Allen, I also was less than an arm's length away from his counterpart, who was the technology brain by the name of Bill Gates. And I always say I was always a pizza slice away from Bill Gates. And actually it was very interesting because when we negotiated contracts underneath high performance and computing, I forgot to mention that, it was his group, and actually that we had to negotiate a lot of the protocols that went into place within the government. But I was there in the early 90s when Bill Gates pulled out his own wallet, his own electronic wallet, and would move currency. And it just never caught on. It just really never looked at that there was an electronic way of moving currencies back and forth way back then. But that currency was tied to the exchange of the US dollar. It wasn't tied to a digital currency or the currency now, if the people that really follow where crypto is going, to the fact that now the Swiss government is backing their government by digital currencies. A few years back when I was advising in New York to the finance industry on the security side of this, about how certain large banking groups were also really looking at what they were going to be dealing with when it came to their digital currencies. So I'm not saying let your guards down, I'm saying put them up even higher, but you're just coming onto the boat and the boat is starting to sail. So with all that being said, I can't get any better than what has already been said. And Don and Alex Tapscott said it well, and it was in our lead-in slide. But I do want to point out one thing, and I was talking to Jessica before she left. Yeah, it's a spreadsheet. That's actually how I always say to Luddites and neophytes, just what is it? I said, look, have you ever used a spreadsheet? And unfortunately, I'm going to tell you something. You ready for this? There is a whole generation that started with the smartphone 10 years that have never used a spreadsheet because there is an app for that. And I'm telling you, this is a really tough hurdle to get over. And not only is really the blockchain a spreadsheet, it is a single column spreadsheet with no other spreadsheets behind it that go on, that really does go on forever. And if you think about how you write each of those blocks by the transaction, it's really one cell in that spreadsheet. And once you've written it, you can't change it. Or you can, but it's going to cost you billions of dollars right now to go back through all of them. I have these arguments with the technology people because I also do some consulting at a well-known government facility just below Cincinnati as to, well, you know, qubit computing, and we are going to have a 51% attack, and how is that really going to look at all of this? Meaning that, you know, you're going to have computing power that really can hit all these nodes and try to do that at one time. As a geek, I want to see it done, and I don't believe it's going to happen in my lifetime, because as the computing power becomes stronger, so is the technology that's going to keep building out, if not this specific chain, but all the other ones. So it was so well done, no sense even going into that. But I do want to talk about this, about the decentralized non-trust-based system. Because when I say it's a non-trust, we were talking about trust. And actually, a lot of people say that blockchain equals trust. You know, it's just an inherited trust. But you got to really read what Satoshi says, okay? Is that we automatically dismiss it because of what's happened in the past. And what he was really, or he or she, I love that, by the way, because we really don't know, and it could actually be a whole consortium of people. But felt that it would be obviously, you know, that it was, if it's centrally controlled and everything from that standpoint, that's what really doomed them. But he said he thought it was the first time that they were trying a decentralized, non-trust-based system. Non-trust-based system. The trust has to be built in. And I'm just, and again, I keep posing this question. We as attorneys in this room have to think about the fact that even though we might have written the most brilliant transactional document for the best contract, are you really going to, we talked about 1-1, you know, you have to know about the risks of this to live up to our code of ethics. But what about 5-1, 5-2, 5-3, 5-4, 5-5? You also have an ethical duty to oversee the people that you are trusting as professionals to make sure that it happens properly. So unless you're all going to run out to coding school tomorrow, then you better at least become familiar with the standpoint of what you're going to be holding your experts and your advisors to make sure that your transactions are going to be executed properly and that you've given thoughts to what's going to happen when they aren't. Because I'm going to hit the other points that we've touched on as well. So I'm not going to beat this as much because it was so well done. I really wish I would have known. I wouldn't even put it there. But the Bitcoin currency really does come down to 2009. There was actually some software that was released that says here's a neat way of moving this currency. It's going to have a value, and try this out. And that's really where Bitcoin comes in. Now, I just want to make sure if you don't take anything away from this, I want you to take this away. Bitcoin is not blockchain. Or for all of those of you that had, you know, introductory math, BC does not equal BT. This is not equal, okay? It is a technology that it uses to actually effectuate what it needs to do. So I loved how Professor Evans also went through to where we are in Web 3.0. But you got to kind of think about some of the things that were happening in Web 2.0. As I told you, I'm going to give you a really brief history because a lot of people have already heard my story. So here's this geek, and he's working for this agency that doesn't exist. And then he gets out and he starts up a business. We didn't call them startups in the very early 80s, late 70s. We call them businesses. And they had to make money, okay? And we weren't allowed to pivot because pivot meant that you weren't going to eat for a couple of months. So you can tell that I advise startup companies. I should say I babysit startup companies on usually behalf of the investors or the seed money. So, but the point is that I took all these disgruntled people, and we found out that there were areas, because we were all mainframe-based guys, we were all mini-based guys, because we had come from these agencies that had huge computing power that took up a room a little bigger than this, to had less power than what your first generation of smartphones had 10 years ago. When I say that I had to learn to program, I was having a remarkable conversation with my esteemed colleague behind you. We were talking about all of our languages that we program in and where we came from. So I don't want to really call, but can I call you out, Steve? So, okay, that's right. So this is not going to be your typical keynote, because I'm not here to really push an agenda. I'm here to stimulate your brain. So we were talking about all these things, and then I found out he's not even a true geek. He's a history major.
I am a true geek. I was certified as a geek by 2 NASA.
Oh, okay, then you are a geek. I apologize and I bow. So, but it really does come down to, this whole area of how we're getting to these parts, and I love this, but I've got a better slide than this about smart contracting, okay? That, how it was really introduced through the initial protocols. And I don't want to really go into effect of, the ERC 2.0 versus 2.0 versus 721s and some of the really geeky stuff. But we've gotten really better over the last course of the couple years. And that's why when I say I have a new hero, I actually know somebody who is looking at the back end of the new protocols. She's ahead of the curve, okay? And that's where we all should be looking. We need to look at the past, see where we came from, but we really have to start understanding what's being put out there, because that's what's going to make these tremendous changes. So how does this all tie to exactly what the mission of this room was? I have a theory and an idea I want to pitch. That, when we start talking at social injustice, I don't believe that social injustice is got a color. I don't believe that it has a gender. I don't believe that it really affects just one individual or one class of people. But I'm going to throw something in there now, because what the technology possibly is going to do to us and our clients is there's going to be a brand new, if you will, unjust area of the application of law. And it's going to be the people that apply technology and have access to that technology, to the people that don't understand it and have no access to that technology. And I'm not just talking about the fact that we have really bad cell signals in this room. I'm talking about the fact that they don't have access to the providers, and those providers don't have access to the legal knowledge and the process people that can make that strong and powerful. So it is the area that I've been trying to evangelize for the last 7 years. Okay, 5 years ago, I saw blockchain as actually the silver bullet for this issue that I kept bringing to all the legal experts' attentions. We have a problem with the GDPR. They didn't even know what the GDPR was, okay? And then when I said, you've got to understand that this is really not the fact that, this is a treaty. This isn't a treaty. This is a group of people's laws that, by extension, affects us. And I'm also a California-based attorney, licensed attorney, as I am in Virginia and as I am in Michigan. And I kind of look at the fact, there's not a lot where it can be affecting you without a sign of a treaty or that you're in a jurisdiction, and it becomes real convoluted. But being the fact that I was the chair of the Arts and Entertainment Group and a member of the Hollywood Bar Association, that's our IP group on the West Coast. Yeah, isn't that crazy? But the fact is, as I was telling you, so you had this high-performance guy that starts up a business, he gets acquired by this company, on the West Coast, and he throws a bunch of money at a bunch of military veterans that really thought, $300 a month was a lot of money in the 80s. And we all went on to do our own things. But I got called back in saying, look, we've got this great opportunity, there's this new administration coming in, and there's all this money that's been actually allocated for this thing called high performance computing and communications. And we want you to join our team, and you'll come back to DC and you'll do all this work because you've already worked in DC for all these years, and we really want you. So I get there and I'm really enjoying my job. I'm working with my development team, and they were developing this new application, if you will. Actually, they were writing code for this really cool piece of software called Mosaic. So here I am at the Mosaic conference, and for those of you who don't know what Mosaic was, it was actually the first graphical interface for the internet. And we hadn't even put the bandwidth or the real protocol into place yet, but there was a real good reason why we had to do that. And I throw this out to this group as to, so who do you think controlled and where the big lion's share of that money came from and went to, and what department oversaw it? Any idea for all of you policy people? That's a good guess, but I'm going to just shake you. It was the Department of the Interior. Now, I know our budgeting areas were really crazy, but does anybody understand what the Department of Interior actually does? They're the people that oversee oil and gas rights. And we had been tracking everything for as deep in the ocean as everything along every one of our shorelines as to where all of these resources were. The problem was we really couldn't communicate those visuals very well across A, tight pipe, and B, nothing to really visualize it on. I'm saying this because this is the same type of issue that we are now expanding on into blockchain. So yes, we are going to repeat the same problems. And when we were working with this group called Network Solutions, and they were the first ones that started giving out domain names, whoever would have thought that if I would have went and got Coke.com, how rich I would be that time. So I don't know why you're even listening to me, because I've done so many dumb things in my life by not accepting that opportunity. So, but I'm going to use this economy, which I call the creative economy, and I've really kind of focused what I thought was on the arts and entertainment, which I've now been led to understand is really media and entertainment. And I'm going to tell you who media and entertainment is. I'm sharing it for this crowd. Media and entertainment's what we call the big three. Okay? It's Alphabet, it's Amazon, and it's Facebook. And that's who controlled the room. Even though Sony was there and Universal was there, and I'm now going to call out somebody else. This is where I met Miss Jessie. And I realized that we as attorneys and we as knowledge transfer people really weren't doing what we're supposed to do. We're not mentoring. We're not relaying how to get the knowledge out there. But she was sitting there from, in essence, somebody who deals with royalties, somebody who deals with records labels, and somebody who deals with the real creative. That person that we were talking about today, about how certain areas are underserved in this, and how do we even get this to level that playing field. The technology will level it. They don't care, what gender you are, what color you are, what country you come from. They only care about, do you know how to use the technology and how to leverage it, or do your experts know how to use that technology and leverage it. So I actually presented a paper to my own state bar, because we were talking with the leading entertainment attorneys a few weeks ago on this issue. And this is what was told to me by the Michigan bar. This is such a complicated area. We find this so difficult for attorneys to grasp that we don't want to publish the paper. And our themed article about how the entertainment industry is changing, because attorneys are just not going to be able to grasp this. Of course, this is coming from a state that does not require CLEs after the day you graduate from law school. So I say that because I throw that down as the gauntlet of this talk, okay? Because I can at least point to the industry that I was most familiar with in that state, because I helped draft the film incentives that wanted every creative and every bit of those people to come in and start building up jobs in that state in the early 2000s. So, but the impact to the creative artists, we as that intermediary role, it's going away. You just got to look at how you're going to transition your business model, because that's where I see the biggest hit coming immediately. But we have got to fall back to what we're really supposed to be. That's counselors at law. What I learned here at Franklin Pierce, I saw, like I said, I saw Professor Murphy coming out of a room last night. He saw me. He says, "What are you doing here?" It's like, didn't we get rid of you? And actually, I got to tell you, I was here for 3 summers, back to back to back. I would do my semester out on the West Coast, and then I would come here for the summer IPSY, and then I'd go back to law school. And I did that for 3 straight years. I didn't have a break. I didn't intern. I came to Franklin Pierce to be exposed to Professor Jorda's licensing classes, to certify as a mediator, to actually be the TA for Susan Ritchie. And so, I mean, I was so exposed. The individual I had to learn my patent training from was the original general counsel for Genentech, you know, and it was, Professor Jepson was just a pain in the butt. It was like if you didn't understand biotech and biochemistry, you were not going to pass his class. So, you know, it was really, it was not an easy time, but it was well worth every minute of it. And when I came back to get my residency requirements, I took all those hard courses that I wouldn't take in law school because I really still wanted to graduate cum laude. And you don't take conflicts of law. Well, it didn't matter here. So I took conflicts of law underneath Professor Hurd, and, you know, and really started understanding how all of this ties. Now it's even gone farther. This is international. You know, our conflicts of law class, unless you've had comparative international studies and really look at some of the great topics I've heard thrown around in this room, you're not going to be able to serve your clients. So, and that's the impact I see to the creative artist and their trusted support entity. That's us, okay? The FTC said we're vendors, but we are also a trusted support entity. I actually refer to us, if you've ever seen anything that I tweet out, it's the T3PV, the trusted third-party vendor. And and the other part is that these are disruptive technologies, but it requires what I learned at Franklin Pierce is that BLT exposure. You got to have the whole sandwich, okay? It's got to have bacon, lettuce, and tomato, especially the bacon, okay? Or it's not a sandwich. But the truth is, it has to be business law and technology. And I don't feel, in my own personal opinion, that there is any equal weight that should be given to all of those, that it's a big blend. And finally, there are, I'm not even going to beat this, I've heard such great presentations and great articles and use cases, but the new technology is actually going to expand the IP economy. And if you think about it, what really does support the US GDP? I don't think it's the auto industry anymore, and it's not the oil industry. So it is the creative economy industry. It is the knowledge. It is the information industry. It's the area that when I was also tutoring the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Korean LLM students that were coming through here, they were here to learn one thing. Okay, they were trying to learn how we were leveraging this. And their plans are not 5-year plans reporting on a quarterly basis. They were 500-year plans. And so I say that, you know, there's some very important areas from this whole tokenization. And tokenization's old. If you want to really go back to your precedential roots, David Bowie was doing this stuff in the 1990s, second day of work at our company. Guess who came knocking? Because the CEO happened to do a Washington Post interview, and I'm not kidding, the second day, the SEC comes knocking. Now, I come from a regulated industry. I had never played with the SEC. I've played with the FTC, I've played with the DOT, but not the SEC. The SEC comes knocking, and it was interesting, they come knocking in Virginia with their people from New York. They didn't even have the nerve to send their people from the DC office. They sent the people down from New York. So, you know, so immediately the CEO gets all freaked out. And I said, don't worry, you know, I mean, seriously, we've done everything right across the board. You know, we are actually vetted. We are all qualified investors, and we know what we're doing. So no problem. However, you don't think about the other sides of this when it comes to regulatory issues. Did you save your tweets? Did you save your communications? How accurate was that white paper before you threw it out there? All the things you have to be relaying to your students, because they are the ones that are going to be dealing with whatever happens to this whole regulatory issue. And let me tell you something. The reason I never wanted to be an attorney is because people go to jail if you get something wrong. Well, the nice thing is you have that I was a trade secrets litigator. And people don't go to jail on trade secrets. You know, there might be $100 million lost here or there or transferred. But, and actually the last case was $2 billion. But that's all right, because it's just going to go from this balance sheet to that balance sheet, so what's the big deal? But, you know, real attorneys, their people go to jail. But then there's this little medium ground of gray, which I call the regulator and the regulations attorneys, which is really where I see all of this kind of merging. And where do we fit there? We're not really, you know, the civil lawyers, and we're definitely not those criminal lawyers, but you know, you got to take on this new mindset. So it's another area for expansion. I learned quickly, because I looked right at this very aggressive woman of color who scared the tar out of me, even though I felt very good that we were doing everything fine. And I said, well, I'm really happy to see you because I was going to actually ask you for an opinion letter. And the first thing is we don't do opinion letters. However, the greatest thing for our value, because now we are in play, was the fact that the second best thing you can get from the SEC is a clean bill of health that you have gone through their inquiry process. So it isn't really bad when bad things happen, because the end result can be pretty good. So I'm saying that, you know, everything old is new again, and it really does. You've got to know where you came from, because that's where some of these answers are going forward. So how do we create our experts? What about the supply chain problem I'm telling you is out there? And now that I have the ears of the people that are supplying my supply chain, because I figured I'm going to take advantage of it, or as I said, I am going to assert my podium dominance. And I throw that out as our big challenge, because you have to have this broad-based knowledge. You have to know how it all goes together to be able to do that. The second thing is that, like I was saying, it's just not business. You know, it's creative problem solving is really a missing problem right now for the people coming into school. I did a study, I actually wrote a paper on the studies of the people coming into UCLA, and they were actually ranked at 23rd of all the industrialized nations when it came to technology and technology competence, 23rd. Actually, Poland was 22nd. And so if you kind of see where we're drawing even those people, and these aren't the people that even made it to law school yet, these are the undergrads. And so, you know, the creative problem solving is a real problem, because we've actually now had this crutch, and you can ask Google anything, and don't even get me started on what Google's results are going to be, because that is a topic for this group for another time. Okay? But, you know, and you got to be a fundraiser. You really have to know how to go out there and get people to give you money, and you have to be a light sleeper, because believe me, it's not going to hit your desk until it's already hit the fan. So the second thing is legal. I mean, we've talked about it. I'm not going to hit on it, but this list is endless. It goes on and on and on. You ever wonder why they made us take negotiable instruments and securities? It's like, what a stupid class. Right? So I say that if I would have known then what I know now. But the list doesn't end. And finally, technology. You do not have to be a geek, but you better be able to at least read it and say it doesn't, I do not fear the code. I'm going to tell you, if anybody followed the Waymo case, since we're all IP people, you should have. Does anybody realize that that judge was an engineer? The judge that oversaw that case, he knew how to code. You were not going to sneak anything by him. And I'm going to tell you something. He wasn't a Ninth Circuit judge. He was in the Northern District of California. So here's another little secret, as I keep telling you more about my story. For the last 5 years, our group, NuStrategies, is a group of reformed attorneys that don't really want to practice law anymore. Like every attorney probably in this room. But what we have been doing is our pro bono, because we all have to maintain our licenses, our pro bono work has been advising the federal bench. and each of their little mini law firms, which they call their clerks, and all the people that support them. So I'm just telling you that I am, in essence, all of your adversaries, because the bench is getting smarter and brighter every day. And now, last year, there was a bunch of money given to all the federal benches to be able to build their technology competence levels. We're still doing it pro bono. But I'm saying that this is an area that at one time, you know, what did they say? A students became judges, B students became teachers, and C students became rich. Well, the A students realized that they need a whole lot more in essence, tools in their tool belt. So this is what I'm trying to get a point across, because the true access to justice is exactly what they're saying here. And it should be pretty powerful that that's where our profession has gone. But it's going to become worse, because it's not only this, but the technology that these people don't have access to. So I kind of broke it down into this whole creative economy, but I just like, this is actually from the legal ops side that I find is a tight tie to this, because not all attorneys going through, not all students going through law school are really going to become attorneys. They may oversee a legal ops function. What I do in the heartland in the Midwest out of Cincinnati is I bring the 3 law schools together. We have UK, we have NKU, and we have UC. And I bring them together, I bring them all to the table and say, look, you guys aren't competing against yourself. You might be competing for some funding dollars, but you are not competing against yourself because you can't supply what we need. I ask everybody, does anybody know what's in Burlington, Kentucky, and why I might be there, now that you heard that I lived in California and I lived in Seattle and now I live in Burlington, Kentucky? We have this little place, it's the headquarters of this company called Amazon Air. And they do drone development, and they do international transportation development, and they do advanced manufacturing and distribution development. And if you kind of think about the fact that they are now the #2 search engine in the world and own the platform that it all goes on, be afraid, be very afraid. So, but these are the areas that I see from the standpoint that we also have to build out. We have to understand knowledge management and knowledge management process, IP protocol and IP management. And also global GRC. Actually, I got to tell you, I've kind of branded this and followed what's known as IRM. GRC is going to be an old term, but integrated risk management. Because attorneys don't even know where our concept of risk comes from. They've never read the Learned Hand case. They don't understand how it was all put together and quantified. So, you know, risk is also something, attorneys are the worst people when it comes to risk. We're risk adverse. We're trained to be risk adverse. That's what we do for a living. But here's the kicker, data analytics. I also consult to a group out of DC that everybody might think that somebody else is doing it when they pull up, you know, their case management software, but there's people that are really doing this on the back end from the analytics side. And these are some bright people. And they are applying some remarkable AI. And so if you don't at least understand infonomics, informatics, then it's another area you better become aware of. And then technology support. You know, do you even know how to deal with those vendors that now you're trusting as your trusted third-party vendor, which you have a ethical duty to oversee anyway? And I'm just asking you from the last part, the service delivery. You know, we need people. We need people that, you know, are going to hit the ground running. So again, you know, practical-based applications. I'm going to tell you, I was actually up for a position with the University of Michigan, and I was one of the last 3 candidates, and I was told that they couldn't really accept me into their esteemed university because I hadn't published enough. And they still haven't caught up with NKU, where I teach and talk extensively, and we are blowing the doors off of real practical-based people that actually have these skill sets. because I also brought those schools that you compete against when you are in a university system. The business school, the computer school, and the law school all compete for those budgeting funds. But if you bring them all to the table and you make them actually talk to each other, you find out that there are some major crossovers that they can all benefit from each other, and to kind of like go out for that funding and then split the pot after it comes in. So how do we create ice baby? You innovate. And we as practitioners, we as academics, we as those knowledge leaders have to think about new ways to innovate our profession and our delivery system. I heard some remarkable innovations here, and each single paper presented, each simple work in progress was innovation. Collaborate. We're attorneys. We go through a system that's a Socratic system, and we are taught to be adversaries. Okay, we don't play well with other kids. It was never on our report card from the first day we started, and it's still not on a report card, but I'm going to tell you what I found in this room was the greatest collaboration I've ever seen. Okay, so we know how to collaborate when we are all brought together for one common cause, but we have to kind of expand that. And finally, we educate. You evangelize, you pontificate, you shout from the highest mountains that this is what's really going to happen, be it right, be it wrong, or be it unfinished. And then go back and, cut, paste, and amend after that. Because it's all great. But you know what? I heard something today that I've heard over and over again. Actually, I started consulting on smart cities issues, on these same exact issues, because all the big law firms, and I'm going to tell you, in the middle of the country where there's presidential names on law firms, they don't have the answers because they are these 200-year-old law firms that just don't know. And you've got to kind of stick your neck out there every now and then and just do the best that you can. But that's the starting point. This was the model. I'm not going to go into it because somebody's actually really addressed it. But these were the models that we talked about a couple weeks ago up north with all of the Midwest entertainment attorneys that have immediate applications, not just applications, but real build-outs. This stuff is happening on the blockchain. Okay? Actually, the attorney I spoke with, he's a revered, he was my mentor when I came up to Michigan. Howard Hertz, I'm going to just say that because if you Google me, you're going to see I spoke with Howard Hertz a couple weeks ago. But we talked about it, and Howard said to me when I asked him to talk, because if you ever see his stable of clients, actually number 3 and number 5 of his clients are the third largest and the 5th largest stream clients on Spotify. And he structured those deals, and they get paid pretty well and on time, unlike a lot of people on Spotify that don't. So, and he said to me after we were all done, he turned to me and he says, I never realized that this is really what it was all about. And we've actually talked about Cobalt and the library. I'm actually very aware of these applications that have been out there and are very established, and they're doing some good things. And so it's not like you're recreating, you're just looking at different business models. But this is always tough. You have to see that because it's actually one of my favorite sites. But they call us pioneers because we're the ones with the arrows in our back as all the adopters come rushing on through. Okay, so, and that's what I see with this group. But we've talked about it. But I really do think that micromediating and micromonetizing is a hot area for review. It's the area I think that we're going to get immediate return off of these newer technologies because it's going to put that power back in those decentralized spaces. These are kind of interesting when you start talking about the faster the technology goes, the faster the, Tanya, you have these slides. The faster the adoption's going to get there. And so it's not going to take it long, so I'm going to just reiterate. Let's innovate, let's collaborate, and let's educate. And now for the academics in the room, I have been turned on to something else that's very exciting that I don't want you to think, that I don't want you to miss. And it's the fact that, we've gone through the first 2 versions of Lex, but there's a new one. And it's some new theories, some new areas that's actually come out of Harvard, but and it's not being shouted from the rooftops. But Lex Cryptographica, I'm sorry, but you really are going to have to believe in the code. And this is what the academics are starting to put out, but you better understand the code or understand the people that are going to tell you how to understand the code. You don't take it on blind faith. Trust me, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. Finally, and it's all kind of a twist on the same thing. They both had 50-year careers, and I don't know who said it first. So I found the other one that I actually found that said the same thing, but only backwards. That if you know where you came, you're absolutely no limitations to where you can go. And I leave you with that thought. Thank you for inviting me.